This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, man.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the Literary Brief Strunk Edition. Just kidding. Not kidding. Kidding, not kidding.
Not
Okay.
kidding.
What?
I cannot kidding right now.
I'm trying to introduce us, Vanessa. Rein it in. Then you can explain your stupid vodka story. Okay. So, I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is
Vanessa Valiente.
And our guest today is Brian D. Anderson. Woo!
Hey!
Let's
D
talk
for a
about-
double dose of my bad writing.
Yes, let's go for episode 2 of Bad Writing. No, just kidding. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking a little bit so people can drink along. So I'm drinking Half Mine Gin that comes from a local distillery, brewery. No, not brewery. Distillery in Dunedin. And it's like a cucumber flavored gin. It's pretty amazing and tonic. Threw a little lime in there like a boss in my Drinking with Authors cup. Brian, we're going to send you one of these. Vanessa, I would like you to explain your I'm not drinking wine because...
Well, because I drank too much wine. So I had to justify in my mind that I'm better off today because I'm drinking vodka, but it's been diluted by water. So...
You know,
I know now saying this out loud makes no fucking sense and I'm crazy. But that's okay, because, who really is sane and do we really want to be sane?
Okay, we're not being philosophical right now. We're talking about what we're drinking. Rein it in, vodka girl.
Vodka, water in this fabulous Drinking with Authors podcast solo cup of magnificence. So there we go.
We also have shot glasses, Brian. You're going to get some of those.
Awesome, Tiferous. That's a word, by the way. All words are made up.
Perfect. I like it. What are you drinking?
I am drinking Jack Daniels.
And why are you drinking?
I was supposed to be drinking Heineken's, but I have teenagers in the house that decided they wanted my Heineken's.
Ooh.
Yes. So,
And
go ahead.
I'm left with... Oh, no. Well, I shouldn't say left with. I love Jack Daniels.
I was about to say, I was like, oh, poor you.
Poor baby. Jack Daniels.
Jack. Poor you.
That's all I ever drink. Like I said in the pre-interview, Jack Daniels and Heineken's because I fear change, and that's all I'll ever drink ever.
Yeah, you definitely strike me as somebody who fears change, not. Okay, rapid fire questions. The first one is, what is your favorite book of all time?
Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings.
Why?
Because it's what got me into fantasy.
That's a good answer. What is your least favorite book of all time?
Tea by Holly Bibble.
Why?
Because it's caused massive amounts of death and destruction throughout the world.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a minute to figure out what I just said.
Tea by Holly. Okay, no, I'm not going to try to figure stuff out. I've drunk like all of this gin. I'm not proud.
Not sober.
Picture the letter T. Now picture the name Holly Bibble.
Not helping. I need
to write this on paper because everything's a little blurry right now.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that vodka's working.
It'll dawn on you later.
It will, and I'm going to email you and go, bah! It's okay, it's fine. So,
Holly Bibble.
Holly Bibble.
The letter T. It's called T by Holly Bibble.
I don't get it.
It's okay.
The
People are listening who are getting it and going, how drunk are they right now?
Bible. The Bible. T by Holly Bibble.
Oh. Yeah, the girl. Okay. There's my Jurassic Park moment of the day. What is your favorite book to TV show or movie?
Probably The Expanse.
Chuck just said that last night. Yes.
Well, I mean, I've only read one of the books, but the entire series, the way they've done it, and the way they portrayed it, and the way they have just, I just think it's fantastic. It's not even the hard science aspects of it, to where they've kept true to the science. I couldn't give a shit about that. I love Star Wars, and they're about as scientifically accurate as, you know. I mean, come on, but the way they've done the characters, and Amos is my favorite. You know, I mean, it's just a fantastic series. They took a great series of books and did it justice. You know, seriously, that and probably Good Omens.
Good Omens was really good. I have to say, you just said it's not historically accurate. One of my favorite things, one of my other co-hosts, her name is Jen, said one time, we were sitting at a table, and I know what she was intending to say, but this will forever be one of the funniest things she ever said. Clash of the Titans is not historically accurate. And I was like,
Neither is the Iliad.
yeah, he literally said that, and I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck do you mean Clash of the Titans is? Did you think it was historically accurate?
Like, who does? I want to meet this person.
Yeah, it was so funny. But what she was trying to say is the stories that they're telling, they jumbled up all the stories.
The mythology.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but it was funny the way she said it, and I was like, okay, just for the record, forever you will have said Clash of the Titans is not historically accurate.
And she is correct. She was right. You gotta get. She was right. Uh-huh.
What is your least favorite book to TV series or movie?
Aragon.
Really? You know, they're talking about redoing that right now.
I heard, and I actually know Chris, and he's such a super great guy. You should have him on your show, and he'd do it too. I mean, I'll put you in touch with him if you.
I was gonna say, invite whoever you'd like to be on the show. Introduce us.
But he's a super nice guy, and he knows. I mean, they ruined his book with that. They actually made it. They ended that movie, and they did that entire movie to where they couldn't do anymore. Because of the way the books went, it was so they turned. I forget the woman's name, the main woman's name, who he ends up trying to save at the end. She was an elf, and they didn't even make her an elf. You know, what I mean, it was a lot of it had to do with the elves. They didn't make those people important. And I heard the same thing, that they're going to redo it, and I hope they do, because it's such a fun series, and it's such an important YA series for a lot of people. It was. For a lot of people, it was what introduced them to fantasy, and
series deserves like a Netflix show or something. Like I don't know if you ever read like the Percy Jackson books, but those
I read one, and my son was really into the movies. And remember, I told you the story about how the Godling Chronicles came out.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Go to the store. Get cigarettes. But
you making your cigarette order on an interview?
Yes,
it's perfect. Fucking perfect.
That's
anyway, he had been watching those movies when he got kind of inspired. So, look, Rick Riordan, he's amazing mid-grade fantasy author. I mean, he's just something else. You know, come on.
His books were so fantastic. It was like, if you were like having like a Harry Potter hangover, but you wanted something sort of different, it gave you that feel of a normal kid who's dyslexic, and he ends up being like this badass, and you find out, all this amazing things, but the movies are horrible.
Well, you bring up Harry Potter. Oh, I'm sorry. You bring up Harry Potter, but Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling is probably the most important children's author since Dr. Seuss.
Oh yeah, but just for the record, the Percy Jackson movies by themselves as movies were actually really well done and well thought out.
Yeah, they were pretty good.
But here's the thing: as the book, the problem is, this is true. We talk about this so much, but the fact of the matter is, when you take a book and try to make it into a movie, there are so many traps and turbulations that you go in through, depending on the story and how far in you have to get the entire expanse. Like, no, Peter Jackson was very lucky that they said you can have 4,000 hours to make the Lord of the Rings series. Because if he tried to do those in 120 minutes each, what do you think those would have looked like?
Yeah, well, he screwed the pooch on The Hobbit.
Oh, I don't want to, don't get me started on that one. But I meant in general, like, it's not the whole story, but he did very well with bringing the idea of the story. We all know, if we've read the books, which a lot of us have, there's all kinds of things that we can go, there wasn't this thing, let's not even get started on Helm's Deep bullshit. Like, there's all these things, but he brought this story, and I feel like the spirit of these stories to the screen, but he was allowed to do it in a certain time frame. And if you're given a movie and you have 120 minutes, and we take even one of your books, Brian, and go, in 120 minutes, tell this story, unless you have somebody really good that goes, I'm going to take this part of this and tell this part of the story, because you're not telling a 140,000 word book in 120 minutes.
Well, that's the advantage of modern live streaming services like Netflix and Amazon and all these different things, that they're doing these series, and they started with the movies the way the Lord of the Rings did it, and very long movies and multiple movies, and how they've done this, started doing it in the theater. Now they're doing it in the streaming services, to where they are doing it in the way it should have been done. Kind of like when they did the Sci-Fi Channel did the Dune series, which is an underrated version of Dune, because they stuck very true to the book, and they did it in a 3-part miniseries. And in the modern way that they're doing this, like the way they're doing The Expanse, the way they did Good Omens, which is the other one I mentioned, and spreading it out to where you actually can do the story justice, I think that's wonderful. I love that that's available now.
Right.
Well, I think exactly, but you have to have enough breath when you're talking about a book. And somebody brought up, when I was asked that question, somebody brought up Jurassic Park. And I remember going to see Jurassic Park, and it was a fantastic movie, but it didn't, to me, tell the kind of the real story behind the book. It changed things. It was very much a kid's movie, which Michael Crichton's book was not a kid's book, right? About what happened on this island. But I looked at it,
the opposite with The Hobbit. They turned a kid's book and tried to make it an adult movie.
Exactly. So I just go, okay, but the movie by itself, if you knew nothing about the book, you would think Jurassic Park is a great movie. They did so many phenomenal special effects, the whole thing.
But again, that's also what I think is the virtue of the Percy Jackson movies. They took a kid's book and they made a kid's movie. So if you were sort of lacking on the substance of the movie, it's because it was made for kids. They actually did stay true to the fact that it was a kid's book, and it was a movie sort of directed towards young people and towards kids. And I thought that was, yeah, I mean, it has its flaws, but it wasn't like a train wreck like The Hobbits. I mean,
no, that's true. I have a question for you. You talked about doing a podcast. So you did a podcast where you talked to authors?
Yeah, I did that for a while.
Tell me about it.
I did it. It was called After the Con. It was the concept was, after the con's over, we're all sitting at the lounge, hanging out, and there's a bunch of writers talking about bullshit. It was a lot of fun. I had R.J. Barker, Michael Sullivan, Chris Paolini. I had Melinda Snodgrass. I had Jody Lynn Nye. I had Carolyn Haynes, a well-known mystery writer. I had, I basically went to the well of all the writers I know.
Is your podcast still up? What was it called?
Oh, it's still up. It's called After the Con. It's on YouTube. There's about like 7 or 8 episodes I did, and it was fun. I'd like to have kept going with it, but I'm so bogged down with work right now. There's no way. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, everything that goes into what these ladies are doing is hard work. Booking the people, booking the people, figuring. Oh man, just figuring all this shit out. It's just, oh my god, it's so time consuming.
It is, but oh my god, so worth it. Okay, Vanessa, rapid fire question.
Ooh. Okay. Pantser or plotter?
Yes.
You know what? I could have predicted that answer.
There's actually an answer to that. Early on in my career, I was almost a complete pantser. I would complete what's also called a discovery writer, where I would start out and then just sort of figure out how it went. I would have key plot points that I was trying to reach, and I had sort of a vague idea where it was going. As I got, it became a lot more difficult with the Barge Blade series because it was such a much bigger world and a more complex plot. And it had to be because we're going to, we're talking about this as Tor, as opposed to me doing it on my own. So I had to sort of have an idea of where I was going. Now with the new one that I'm coming out with, the Forge of Worlds, we're talking about 200,000 word novels. I have a companion book that's probably going to be 600,000 words of just the mythology and lore. I have to plot that out. I can't pants that. It's too, it would get just too confusing. It got being a pantser really fucked me up in the Godling Chronicles because it ended up being such a massive 6-book, 100,000 plus word per book series that like I had to keep track of all this shit and and especially in the beginning.
I don't write fantasy or science fiction for this reason. I am such a pantser that absolutely under no fucking circumstances do I want to keep world books or try to keep any of that straight.
Well, I'm not a very good plotter. That's my problem. I'm not my mind isn't organized that way. But I have to adjust because of my stories are getting bigger and bigger. I have to adjust, and I have to realize that I have limitations. So I have to compensate, and plotting it out helps to compensate.
Right. Yeah. No, I think outlining plotting, I think every writer has a different way they have to approach it. We also all have different memories, and I think people forget that. Like, I do a thing when I'm rewriting some of, like, going to the next in a series of one of my books, and I'll actually just reread both, like whatever the books are in the series to remember as I start to sit down and write again, so I don't forget some of the key points of my series. But I'm very lucky because it's set in modern day, and there's not a lot that I have to go back to. Like I jot down what the characters look like so I don't spontaneously change races, looks, whatever characters' names. No, I still change the names. I'm horrible about that. But I do make a point to keep track of that. But I know, like, my first couple of books I ever wrote as a kid were, or younger, were 2 high fantasy books that happened to get destroyed by a lightning strike on a Mac tower. But they were, the whole world, they weren't any good. It's probably good the lightning struck them and they will never see the light of day. But
Thoth brought her wrath down upon you.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, do not publish this shit. I was like 13, 14 when I wrote them. But I know for a fact, as I've grown as a writer, I go, as much as I can think, I played Dungeons and Dragons. I've played all of these high fantasy games. I'm playing the One Ring right now with Dan Wells, but I know I do not want to do that. I do not want to do world building that way. It's not my thing.
But why not?
No.
Some people it is, and especially like gamers and shit that like really want to run games. The whole world building process. Brandon Sanderson does a great seminar on that. You can find it free on YouTube about world building. He gives he's doing a class I think at Brigham Young or
He's a professor. I've actually watched those videos. It's like he recorded a series of whatever one of his.
And one of them was on world building, and it's if you want to write these kind of big worlds, it's helpful even if you're a pantser to pay attention to what he's saying because it'll keep you from driving yourself batshit crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to do it, so I'm gonna hard pass on all that and stick with my horror and my erotica. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm not lacking. I'm not sitting there going, you know what? I want to write a book about magic. Like that's not happening in my brain.
I'm thinking about an erotica story where I'm like sitting. I'm thinking about an interview I want to do. I want to go. I haven't had a real job in years, but I do want to go on an interview. And while I'm sitting there talking to the guy, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, well,
Vanessa, throw that in your series right there. Make a note and throw it in your series.
and if he says something, go, oh, did I do that? It's a nervous tick. Sorry, it's when I get nervous. I do that.
Did my nipple just slip out? I don't know.
Okay, being HR, guys, being HR, weirder shit has happened to me in interviews. Weirder shit has happened.
So, what other kind of awesome questions do you have for me?
Ooh, many gin-filled questions. Okay, what about music? Do you listen to music when you're writing?
God, no.
Okay, first of all, tone. Second of all, why?
Because I'm inside my head. I am anything that brings me outside my head is gonna fuck with me. I'm completely. There's a disorder where you can't visualize shit. Mark Lawrence actually has it. You can't visualize things inside your head. I'm the complete fucking opposite of that. When I write, I am completely into the scene, and anything that would take me out of that, any kind of distraction.
Tunnel vision?
Well, no, it's like I immerse myself when I'm writing. So it's like I'm in the scene when I'm writing. So for me to listen to anything in the background, it would be like somebody itching the back of my head while I'm trying to concentrate. I'm immersed into the scene I'm writing, so no music.
Well, that's interesting considering you're a musician. I think that's
no. I love music, just not when I'm writing.
No, I know. It's just anyway, I've interviewed several people who are musicians and writers, and the music is like my muse. Is there anything as a reader that completely will throw you out of a story?
I mean, I'm pretty easy to please. I'm not one of those jackasses who finds one flaw with a book and decides to lambaste the writer on Amazon. What brings me out of the book is when I think that the tension is being contrived, as opposed to when it's like when I feel that like the tension is there just because the writer felt the tension needed to be there at that time, and it really doesn't make logical sense with the flow of the rest of the story. I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, that and just bad writing.
Do you finish books? No, totally. Will you finish books though? Like a lot of writers will be committed and they'll finish a book. I won't. If you do it too much, and it doesn't take long, but I don't have the time with everything I'm doing to try to trudge through what you failed to do as a writer for me.
Well, that, I mean, because there's a lot of indies out there who are like sitting there thinking that their prose is one thing. They have that, what's that, the Dunham Kruger effect,
Mm-hmm.
where they think that they're here and they're way the hell down here. And I'm reading and I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, what is it about what makes it bad writing? I was like, well, it's like that guy in the Supreme Court who said, yeah, I don't know what, I can't describe porn, but I know it when I see it. I can't tell you what makes their writing bad, but I know it when I'm reading it. And I'm like, oh no. When there's such poor word choices and just obviously this person is not ready for prime time. And I actually get kind of bothered by that, especially if I spent money to read the book. And that's one of the biggest failings of indie, I think. And it's one of the things we get criticized for in indie is that you can basically, any asshole with a computer can throw any piece of shit up on, Kindle and, call it a book.
No, it's true. You'll lose fans though. I mean, if you're going to do that, you're not going to get editors. You're not going
They're
to
not going to lose fans. They're never going to get fans.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Pick up that book again. What about reviews? Do you read reviews?
Oh yeah.
What do you think? Do you leave reviews?
No, I never. I'll leave reviews with books that I like from people that I know.
Do you,
Um,
do
I
you
don't.
get asked to read books? Like, how do you approach that? Because you've been doing this a while. You have a lot of books to your credit. I think it's
I'm not bothered by bad reviews. Let me tell you, there's nothing you can say to me. There's nothing you can say about my books that is going to make me upset. I've had personal attacks. People in Dragonvein, the main character abuses women. Now, I also explained that he abuses women because he used to abuse men, but men broke too easy. In the same way, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? And I never show it. You know what I'm saying? I never show the abuse. I'm not there for the shock factor. I put it in because that character, I'm trying to make this character really as evil as I can make him. And to me, that was is about as evil as you can make somebody. Yeah, that would do something like that to somebody. And I got accused of being pro-rape. And I'm like, I'm writing about a horrible villain who would do awful, awful things. How is it me? That
That's okay. If you read my first published story, I'm apparently pro-suicide, so we're good. We can be birds of a feather on that.
But I've had people say that you say the most horrible things about me personally. If you don't like my work, that's cool. That's your prerogative. I mean, I'm not bothered by that. I've had thousands of reviews, and a lot of them great, some of them bad, some of them awful, some of them shining. I you know I do enjoy the feedback to see what I'm doing right. If the marginal some things still get under my skin, like when somebody says, "I love this book. It was awesome. 3 stars."
Someone throws up a 1 or 2 star, and I'm trying to be like, okay, where are we at here? Like,
I think you have to take the reviews with a grain of salt. The only time that any numerical system works for me is if they actually are able to point out something that's legitimately wrong. Like the author kept switching tenses throughout the book. Well, that may be a thing, but just to say, loved it, it was great, 3 stars, you got to go cool. And I think as readers, if you read reviews for the book, if you want to do that, for whatever reason, I don't read reviews for a book because I feel like my view of the book is going to be my view. And did they pull me in with the blurb, and did they pull me in with the cover? Am I interested in reading it? That doesn't mean I'll fucking finish it, because if I don't get into the story or you throw me on the fucking story, I'm not going to finish it. But I look at the reviews and I see sometimes, and I'm like, you literally have to take every review with a grain of salt.
Well, I will. We were talking about the difference between Indian traditional and me going away from my traditional my wisdom. Traditional wisdom tells you start out with a bang, right?
Yeah.
And if you read the first chapter of the Bard's Blade, it absolutely does not do that.
Vanessa, you read the first chapter. Does it do that?
No, I can even read.
But originally it did.
I mean, it starts with the main character leaning back in a chair. So
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, unless something falls on her and like,
No,
you
no.
know.
I mean, originally it started out with a pregnant woman being chased by hounds through the wood.
Oh, okay.
And
But
now they're in a chair and not being chased by hounds.
No. They said, let's do away with that. And I'm like, okay, what do you want instead? And when it was described to me, I'm like, okay, so you want a long expected party? And the first chapter of the Lord of the Rings, I said, you're wanting a kind of a long expected party thing? They go, yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, I could do that. And to be honest, I love the way the Bard's Blade opens. It opens with showing the reader life in Valerie, how the people interact, a little bit of, because there's so little time spent in that part of the world, that showing what that life is like. But I still would have. But I tell you what, I got criticized heavily for that. The reviews came, and I got criticized heavily for this slow burn at the beginning. Now, if you read any of my other books, none of them start out that way. I mean, they all start out with like, there's 2 seconds to live, and then fucking you better run. You know what I mean? It's all tension right at the beginning. So I did enjoy doing that, and it actually has impacted my writing. I think I went a little too far. I think, as much as I love the way my editor helped me edit that book, I would have went a little different. If I had it to do over again, I would have started out with an innocuous scene, an action scene that would have made sense later in the book, and then went to that chapter and went like that, which is what I did in the Forge of Worlds. Is I sort of compromised. I put an action scene, but it wasn't necessarily a dire life or death thing. You know what I'm saying? It was.
No, it makes sense, and it's one of those kind of lesson learned things, and you have to go, what is my thing? Because I love editors. I really do love editors. I am a huge fan of editors.
Lindsay Hall is one of the best in the business.
But sometimes you have to go, like with anything, and go, but this is my voice and this is my story.
No, Lindsay didn't take my voice away. She or even it wasn't that. It's like she took away a part that was going to precede the part that ended up being the beginning. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, that makes sense. But you have to go with your gut sometimes.
And I'm like, to me, my traditional wisdom was going, if I don't open it up with a bang, nobody's going to want to read past the third page. But then I had to think, hey, in a lot of these books that I've read, reading a little bit about the world and seeing some personal interactions that don't necessarily have any dire consequences is not necessarily a bad thing. It also all can add to the world, add to the flavor of the story, and I think that's what it did, and it did have me concentrating on that more, and so it had that positive impact.
No, that's good. Okay, we actually are nearing the end of the podcast. Vanessa, I'm going to let you ask the last question.
Ooh, okay.
I also know how drunk you are right now and that you're not really at the point of asking questions, so go.
Oh, okay. Favorite genre of music?
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, you let the drunk girl ask the last question. That's what's going to happen.
There's no way I can answer that question. Because,
Okay, at least get. Okay, how about this? What is a book that you recently read that you absolutely adore that you would like to share?
The Bard's Blade by Brian D. Anderson.
This book right here.
You know what? Here's what I'll say about that, and here's how I'll answer that question. The wonderful thing about fantasy is that you can read The Bard's Blade, that you can read Name of the Wind, you can read the latest Sanderson book or the latest whoever the hell, and or something new like Evan Winter, or or I can't recommend a genre enough than fantasy, because unlike a lot of other genres, I write classic fantasy. Well, you have a lot of LGBTQ fantasy coming in. You have a lot of Asian-based fantasy coming, but you know what they do? It's not they don't displace classic fantasy. It's an addition to classic fantasy. It enhances the genre. It adds to the genre. It's not now there was this, now there's this. It's there is this and this now. And so whatever you decide to pick up, whether it's one of my books or somebody else's books, there's going to be something in the fantasy genre for you. There's going to be urban fantasy. There's going to be steampunk. There's going to be flint-like fantasy. There's going to be just you name it. There's going to be fantasy romance. There's going to be paranormal. There's going to be always something there for you. And my recommendation as a first book, something I would recommend, I would start with The Lord of the Rings and start with the Godfather of fantasy, and find out why guys like me, guys like Sanderson and Rothfuss and Sullivan and Lawrence and all of us, why we got into it in the first place. Actually, I would start with The Hobbit, because that's a children's book. And
But the book, not the movie, right?
Oh, the book. Well, yeah, of course the book. The movies suck.
Okay, why are you poking the badger with a stick?
I was just saying because I know how you guys have very strong feelings, and
I have many strong feelings about these things. Here we go, nipple rubbing. Okay, so Brian, on the nipple rubbing tale, how do fans look at you? What's the best way to find your books?
Look up Brian D. Anderson, and hope you don't. And if you think you're on Brandon Sanderson, it's okay. I understand that mistake.
As we promote Brandon on this podcast.
Before we go, I do want to tell a funny story.
Please.
We have time?
Absolutely.
All right. Of course, my name is Brian Anderson. I used the D at the onset of my career because there was a a pitcher for the A's named Brian Anderson. There was a skateboarder named Brian Anderson, and there was a guy who wrote comic books named Brian Anderson. So I decided instead I didn't want to use a pseudonym, so I used my middle initial to distinguish myself from these people. It wasn't till a little later when the first book of the Godling Chronicles was out that I received a review that said, "Hey, love this book. Also love Mistborn," and I'm like,
You're like, huh?
the fuck?
You're like, nailed it.
And I'm like, and I knew who Brandon Sanderson was. I had to look up Mistborn because I knew Brandon Sanderson because he had finished off the Wheel of Time series. And I'm like, holy shit, okay, thanks, I'm Brandon Sanderson. And I didn't want to break it to the guy, but this happened like 4 or 5 times. I'm like, thinking I'm Brandon Sanderson. And I'm like, oh fuck, man, people are gonna think I did that on purpose, man, to like fool people. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Nobody's ever gonna. This writing thing's not gonna go anywhere anyway. What are the odds of me running into Sanderson? Well, we both have the same publisher now, so the odds have increased.
Oh my gosh, have you met him yet?
No, I have not. But the funny thing is, Brian D. Anderson, when you look at it, does look like Brandon Sanderson. My middle name is Don. So if I just used my entire middle name, not only would it look like it, it would sound like it. Brian Don Anderson.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I wonder, you know what's funny though? I can't wait to talk to Brian. Brent, oh my God.
Oh my God, you're now proving his point.
Yeah, exactly. But now I want to ask him if he gets mistaken for you.
No.
I'm going to remember to do that. It's going to be amazing.
It would probably make him feel like shit. I mean,
I doubt it.
Oh,
okay.
Come on. Yeah. It'd be like Stephen King being, oh God, I don't even have, I kind of lost that one. Peter Jackson being mistaken for that guy with the little mustache that did like the porn movies.
Are you talking about Jeremy?
Oh
my God. Okay, we're way too drunk to be saying names. Okay, we're gonna wrap up this podcast. This is bad. It's going off the rails. Okay, this has been Drinking with Authors Literary Briefs. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today has been
Vanessa Valiente.
Our phenomenal guest has been Brandon Sanderson.
His nipple. But
Sum it up that way. Brian D. Anderson has been our guest, and we will see you guys next time.